very exciting to be here at opening this. Okay, opening. Who doesn't want to try wild type? Who doesn't want to try cultivated meats and doesn't believe that cultivated meat is actually an option for our consumers as they try to get something that's better for the environment, better for animals, obviously, and maybe even better for your health as you try to get rid of mercury and antibiotics, etc. So wild type has been getting so much financing. So let's just see what that's like for wild type. Is it possible? We've been talking about it from a big standpoint of like, yes, wild type, they're the future, they're the optionality, but are they really? Let's find out from one of the co-founders today. We are here. I'm going to try cultivated meat, well, cultivated seafood. Actually, for the very first time, I want to say hello in the offices of, let me get this right, Arye Elfenbein. Arye Elfenbein, who is here to show me. Now, we can't show you everything. I'll just show you the doors that I cannot see. Let's turn around. We're turning around. We cannot show you. We cannot show you what is behind those doors, but we can show you what is happening over here. And I'm able to try cultivated fish, seafood, salmon for the very first time. I'm over the moon, as you can imagine, because this is my first time. I will have to say that as I get situated here and I have my interview with Arye, Blue Nalu said to me many times that they would have me down to San Diego, and yet they still are not ready for what we're doing here today, which is, I want you to see that, folks. It is salmon cultivated without the fish. I'm not sure if people recognize what I'm talking about here, so I want to make sure that I'm making that completely clear. This is salmon that does not involve fish. So for those of you who are mission aligned, like I am, by the way, it's a big deal. This is a big deal to me. I have to say that. So I drove down here 4 hours through wine country. I'm kind of late. We've had a long day. You might say, like, why are you doing this, Elysabeth? This is a completely volunteer activity for you. Why do you do the plant-based business hour? There's like no like business in it for you. It's because I want a knowledge drop for people. I want people to understand like what the heck is going on here as we try to make our food supply system better for everyone. So Arye, tell me, what do I have in my hand and why is it history in the making?
So this is cultivated salmon. This is salmon that was grown outside of the animal. We have been working for about 5 years now to be able to produce a product like this. And I would love to hear what you think.
Oh my gosh. So now I get to try it. I mean, like all this talk about like, because we do on this television, this TV show, as you know, we do, why is it better for no antibiotics? Why is it better that you aren't feeding, mass commercialized fish? All these reasons, which people on my show know already, that you don't want draining the wild. And you can tell me this, Arye, if you'd like to. Why do we need to not drain our wild supplies?
I mean, there are more and more issues with our current. Do you want to try it first? We can sort of get into it in a little bit.
I sure do. Oh my God. So just FYI, folks. So I got wasabi right here. I got ginger right here. And I got salmon, just like you would sushi in a restaurant. Okay. So everybody, I'm going in. Oh, and by the way, I'm bringing it with some soy because that's how I like to roll. So, soy. Oh my God. I really feel like it's one thing to have change in Arye's lifetime. It's another thing to have change in my lifetime. We're different decades. We're talking about change in my lifetime, Arye. It's a big deal. And so I hope I don't get like teary-eyed as I do this. Like, okay, everybody, salmon without the salmon. You're lying. You're lying. Like that's salmon.
That is salmon, but it's salmon that's grown outside of the animal.
Okay, so let's just talk about this for a second, folks. It's not just the texture, and it's not just the taste. There's a certain, this isn't meant to be disparaging, there's a certain sliminess of fish. Slides right down like salmon.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this was, there's so many complexities to what raw salmon in particular encompasses, everything from the aroma, starting even from the appearance. And these are all aspects that we really needed to study first before we could learn how it is that we could grow these cells into the same cuts of salmon that we're used to trying.
Mm-hmm. And for lack of a better expression, why? You're a cardiologist, you're young, you're successful in many ways in your life. Why would you go down this endeavor?
I think that there are many individual missions that are part of why Wildtype exists. The first is more and more our methods of obtaining seafood are ones that are not just not sustainable, but completely not keeping up with all of the demand that increasing generations of people on this planet want for their seafood. Another one is that our seafood supply is becoming increasingly contaminated. And so that means everything from these toxins that are just pervasive and have been part of what we now accept as a part of our seafood system. So everything from heavy metals to antibiotics, microplastics, there are more parasites in our seafood, and increasingly pharmaceuticals that are found in our waters and end up accumulating within fish. And, these together led Justin and me to think, can we produce seafood in a way that is truly sustainable? That word is used a lot, but is there a way to create it in a truly sustainable manner and also create the cleanest seafood on the planet? And these are the two reasons why Wildtype was founded. It also, one of the reasons we chose salmon is that from here to Alaska is salmon country. And in all the rivers and streams, there used to be all kinds of salmon coming back every year, where now there are none. And this was a really real opportunity to act in the name of conservation for what really is our hometown fish.
What do you mean by this, that there were many that were coming back and now there are not?
So salmon runs historically, if you go to some of the little streams in Muir Woods, for example, just north of San Francisco here, used to be filled with salmon every year. And now they're either not there or you can see just a few every now and then. And it's a real rarity.
Interesting. I have a very different take. When I was in Alaska, I would see salmon coming naturally back to the place that it always knew. So they would spawn where they always knew that they were supposed to spawn. And it was upsetting to see the commercialization. I'm going to have a very hard time explaining this because I'm not a commercial fisherman, but there was a commercialization around exploiting the fact that they knew that they would come back. And so they would capture them on this way back to find their natural place to spawn as a way to trap them and kill them. I can't explain it in full, but I just felt like this is a commercialization of the natural process that I'm not comfortable with. Right. Does any of that ring true to you?
Absolutely. I mean, so much of the way we produce seafood today, in terms of large commercial operations, doesn't feel natural. And so everything from we found out just 2 years ago that the carbon emissions from trawling. And trawling is kind of the industry standard these days of dragging these ocean-sized nets across the bottom of the ocean. The carbon emissions from that is more than the entire aviation industry worldwide. And so what's natural about that? There's nothing. This is not a fisherman or a fisherwoman sitting on the pier and catching dinner. This is something that is much greater and much more destructive in the end. And so this is just one example of how commercialization has absolutely changed the environment and really provided an opportunity for us to try to create a new alternative, something to take the pressure off the oceans.
I love that you say this because I often get the feedback that eating meat is natural, and so eating meat out of a lab is not natural. And I say, just as Arye does, no, there's nothing natural about commercialization to such an extent that you are exploiting these species to their distinction, actually, to that they no longer can survive and thrive. And that's what we have, is the exploitation to the extent that they're no longer thrivable. So it's very interesting to me to see that we would have cultivated meat now growing from sources other than the animal itself. What do you use for your cell lines, and how prolific can those be?
Yeah, these are great questions. The cell lines that we use, it actually, everything that you tried today and everything that you saw came from one fish about 3.5 years ago. And we haven't, one fish. We actually haven't needed to go back to the animal for salmon since that time. And in terms of what we feed these cells, this has been a really fascinating part of the journey of Wildtype, is learning what these cells need to thrive. In some ways, they're similar to what fish need. And so it's things like sugars and fats and amino acids so that they can make proteins and some trace minerals. And that's really what we feed them. And so in the tanks that you saw today, those are the ingredients that go into feeding these cells, and they continue to grow. And in theory, they can just continue to grow. And so your question of, how long can this go out? That this is something that theoretically that one fish could actually feed the world.
So that's incredibly sustainable. So you think about one fish, and then also think about the other things that happen with the fish. So if you have commercialization of fish, which means you have lots of commercial fishing, and by that I mean you're not wild fishing. You're controlling fish in one area. They're all pooping in the same area. All that poop of lots of fish. So the volume of fish that you need to 7.7 billion people on the planet. So the volume of fish that you need to feed 7.7 billion people on the planet, all concentrated poop in one area. There's lots of reasons. And then you have to feed those fish antibiotics because they're all living together, which means they're all sick together. So you got to, there's lots of reasons that this kind of mass commercialization doesn't make sense. If you take all of that out and you're living with, enough fish potentially from one cell line to feed the world, is that right? Have I understood that correctly?
I mean, that's how it begins. Certainly, in order to feed that fish, and those fish cells, we need to source all of the ingredients that will enable it to thrive. And that's a separate set of supply chains, but ones that are more efficient than feeding fish for 2 years for them to sort of swim around in a fish farm before harvest. There are a lot of inherent efficiencies in the ways that we produce it here. So, for example, typically 40% of a fish will be discarded as inedible. Everything that we don't usually eat, from the head to the guts to the fins and so forth, that can be used for other sort of streams. But typically that's just discarded right off the bat. Whereas what we do is we only grow the fish that we eat, and so by that I mean the cuts of fish, the muscle and fat that are the cuts of sashimi that you just tried, for example.
And so how long does it take to grow a fish or a cut of sashimi in your cell line?
Yeah, typically, it's in the order of weeks. It's something that we're still working to improve, but I'd say 4 to 6 weeks for a typical cut of salmon.
Okay, so if you're comparing 4 to 6 weeks in a sashimi cell line, and that means not 2 years and not the poop concentrated in one area and not all the antibiotics and not all the fish that are sort of sick together, swimming in around in an area that is not natural to them because they're constrained. That sounds only positive. So what would be the negative to growing a cell line in 4 to 6 weeks for a cut of sashimi? What obstacles do you have?
I think the biggest obstacles we have are around what it takes to scale up this process. So, if we were to estimate to produce about 1% of the seafood in the world per year, we would need all of the steel tanks that exist in the world. And that's only to make 1%. And so as we think about scaling up,
Wait. When you say all of the steel tanks, do you mean like you'd take all the steel tanks from beer? Like, what do you mean?
In order to make just, around 1% of the seafood in the world, it's enormous. And so as we start to think about, what it means to scale up, we need to really reimagine what growing cells at large scale means, and need to think about innovative approaches that don't exist today, and building an infrastructure around that, and doing that in a truly sustainable way. So everything from relying on renewable energy to power these systems.
Why renewable energy?
Well, I mean, if we are not looking at renewable energy, and if if this becomes a very energy intensive process, then we are not really helping in terms of overall planetary health.
Is it demanding in terms of energy?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there, at a small scale, there are certain efficiencies that aren't achieved yet that will be at a larger scale. But everything from growing these cells in these tanks certainly requires power, and we just need to be thoughtful about where that power comes from, what we can use as renewable energy, and even what our water utilization looks like. We don't want to be doing this in parts of the country that are prone to drought, for example. And so it's one of the considerations that we have around where larger scale production will be.
So, where do you foresee larger scale production, and what do your investors say in terms of where you're going to produce around the country?
I mean, that's something we're still in the process of sorting through. I think that those guiding principles will, get us to places that, again, where renewable energy is important and a very reliable source of power, as well as where water is not as much of an issue. Those are the two main inputs that I think we consider more than others when we think about the best places to produce at large scale.
And when do you think you'll be considering? Because when you consider energy and water, you're considering mass scale. So you're not quite there yet. When will you be considering mass scale?
I mean, certainly this is something that we're starting to plan currently. I think in the next few years, we'll be building in that direction.
So your investors have been prolific. May I say that? How much money have you raised thus far?
I mean, thus far we've raised about $120 million, and that was, since we began about 5 years ago.
If you didn't have investors behind you, would you be as gung ho as you are?
I mean, I think that the investors we've had have actually been incredible partners. I don't know if we would have been. Yeah, we are lucky. I know that's certainly not always the case, and I don't think we would have been able to build the team that we built without these investors. And so, part of it is the partnership from the investors themselves. These are people who have believed even from the very early days when there were just a handful of companies in this space, and this really was just a crazy dream. And so we feel super fortunate for the people who believed from those early days and still do, and have been a huge part of what the journey's been like for now. So yeah, they're a big part of why we feel gung ho about it.
It's a little bit of magic. It's a little bit of stardust, I must say. So, as you focus all your energies here, you're a cardiologist by trade, if I've got that right. What made you decide to put your energy towards food sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, I was studying how the heart can regenerate after a heart attack, and at one point, I was thinking as I went back to my childhood home of Australia and saw parts of
Via Israel, right?
right, yeah, and saw parts of the country that used to be rainforest and are now used to raise cattle, and thought, could we eat meat and not eat animals? And, could we take everything that we've learned about how cells communicate with each other and grow and organize together and just create the same thing, just outside of the animal? And that's kind of where it began. And, I met Justin about 10 years ago. And for a long time, we were talking about many of these emerging technologies and how they could be applied in contexts beyond what, they were originally imagined for. And this one, for all of the reasons of health, of the environment, of ecology, of just the beautiful artistry of food. This was something that was just unified all of them together, and we really felt with conviction for the first time that this was something that could work and have a meaningful impact. As a society generally, we're starting to understand so much more about our food choices. I think that a future that's even more inspiring is one where there's just greater transparency and traceability in our food. And I think that, today there are so many exposés of sushi restaurants, and, reporters will go in and order the bluefin tuna and then do a DNA test and realize that was nothing like bluefin tuna, actually. And there's just so many questions. There's so many questions around what it is that we're actually consuming. And I think having not just more choices, but more traceability and transparency around each of those choices. That's a future where I think people will understand exactly what cultivated meats and seafoods are, what plant-based actually means, what conventional agriculture is, and even what conventional agriculture or fishing that is done by stewards of the ocean, people who care about the numbers of fish that are taken out, who really think about sustainability, because if too many fish are taken out one year, then the following year they won't have as many. I mean, I think that when customers are able to have all those options and understand all of those, that's a future where they can make choices that are actually more meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I reiterate this 100% in that I feel that something that's going to be very exciting for people once we nail down the ability to scale. So we do have to do that. People are going to say, like, I've got the coolest cell line. I've got the one rare blue fin thingy over here. I mean, right now we're trying to go for, here we're trying to go for our basic salmon that we love without torturing salmon and without getting antibiotics and hormones and all the rest of it in our over commercialized fishing system. So here we have that cell line without all that. But ultimately, people are going to want the exotic blue thing. And you're going to be able to do that through cells.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's a very brave new world here in San Francisco. Do I have it right that you might leave San Francisco?
We don't have plans for the core of the company to leave San Francisco. Whether or not scaling will happen somewhere else is yet to be seen.
Okay, so let's talk about scaling. When will that happen, please?
So scaling is something that is happening right now. Where you saw some of the facilities here and what we've been able to create in terms of a pilot plant, and it's constantly a road of envisioning larger scale systems, testing them, understanding what are the parts that create problems when they are larger, because it is never as easy as just sort of putting it into a larger tank. But that's a journey that we're certainly on right now.
And when might I see you like roaming the aisles of Whole Foods?
I think a lot of that will depend on FDA. And FDA is an agency that we've spoken to now for about 2.5 years. It's been actually a really wonderful process. It hasn't been a fast process, but it has been really a thoughtful one, with learning on both sides. And I imagine, not just for our field generally, you'll probably start to see the first products approved in the U.S. I imagine in the next year or so. But that is on
2023.
Yeah, I mean, but that is certainly on FDA's timeline, and this is the kind of thing that we don't think should be rushed. I think that for consumer confidence and just acceptance of such a new type of food, that process should proceed at its own rate.
Why would anyone be skeptical of cell lines? For example, I just ate this, folks. So why would I be concerned about cultivated salmon?
What we found is not concerns, at least from FDA, but just an understanding of what it means to grow cells in this manner. And actually, the more that we have gotten into it together, we've found that there's not so much that's controversial about it. The inputs are ones that are already in our food system, that already have regulatory precedent, and I think just a lot of it was around learning this new system of creating food.
Mm-hmm. So let me understand this: when you have your serum, your base serum from which you grow, how much of it is fish based?
Yeah, so it's not it's just the fish cells. It's not a serum that comprises the fish part of.
So let me just help people there. There's a lot of talk about fetal bovine serum for meat, and that they're taking actual serum from newborn baby cows to then from there grow to the cultivated meat that they want. Are we talking about that here? Baby fish? No.
That's not what we're talking about, but that is true. When we start new cell lines, that is a tool that will enable cells to grow when you don't know what the cells really need to thrive. And I think all companies in our space, just like the pharmaceutical industry, will be able to achieve a completely vegan formulation for those cells. That's been done before. I think that yeah, absolutely. I think that that's not really a controversial thing either. It's just a matter of understanding what these cells need. But but that's the question I think was on you're asking in terms of how the cells are able to grow on their own. So they grow just in the ways that I was showing, but that's not enough to get them to organize and mature together. For that, we actually use a plant-based scaffold, and a scaffold is essentially a structure. It kind of looks like a mesh, and the cells will migrate into it. They'll grow and organize and mature together, and that eventually creates all of the complex textures and flavors of the cuts of fish that you're trying now, for example.
So is that infrastructure there in business? Because that's not obvious to find either. Do you find enough scaffolding?
So we've actually created our own formulations. I think that now you're starting to see some companies that are interested in just getting into the business of making scaffolds, and I think that that's wonderful. I think the more choices that we have in terms of textural complexity and understanding which scaffolds are most optimized, the better the products will be.
I think this is so key, because as we get more and more investment into this area, everyone's so excited about the novel innovation and the novel cell line. But really, we need the infrastructure, because if you don't have the infrastructure, you won't have the scale. And if you don't have the scale, then what's the point? So it's exciting to have the headline for the young entrepreneur who's changing the world. It's more than exciting. And I'm so happy to be here trying this. But if we can't do it at mass scale so that everybody gets to do this, then what's the point, right? Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, if we don't achieve the objective of accessibility, then right, why are we doing this? And that's been our objective from the very beginning.
So accessibility, what do you think this will cost when it finally gets to Whole Foods?
I think when it gets to the supermarket, it'll probably still be at somewhat of a a mild premium. I think that eventually, though, all of the kinds of efficiencies that we were describing will enable not just us but others in the space to go below what price parity is, and that becomes a really interesting moment, because then people would be paying more for a product that has some of the contaminants that we're describing, and that's a fascinating moment. I can't wait.
That's a fascinating moment. It's going to happen in both our lifetimes. Who's going to pay more to have contaminants that are also polluting not only your own internal system, but the world outside you? So that fish might have carbon taxes for all we know, because it's polluting the environment so heavily. So I think it's going to be just like if you walked onto an airplane with a lit cigarette. It's very. So when will we start to see wild type in grocery stores?
I think we'll wait for FDA.
Oh, waiting for it. So we're looking at 2 years.
We'll see.
We'll see. Okay. So fair enough. What do you wish you knew 2 years ago that you know now, having gone through this?
Wow, what a question. I wish I'd known. I wish I'd known what and really understood what a small, highly motivated, incredibly talented and kind group of people can do, with not much of a budget, and without as many resources as we would have liked. I think it was a real surprise and an incredible one, and one for which I'm so grateful now. But I didn't understand that to the extent that it happened back then. That's something I wish I had known.
So are you saying that you were driven by science and you met your friend Justin, who's a diplomat, and you said, like, wow, this is cool, we could do this together, but you hadn't yet tapped into the field of those who are mission aligned and you didn't know their power? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I was speaking more to the group of people who joined us, in those early days, and just believed in this dream, and what we could do with such a small team here, in such a small period of time. But that's part of it too. It did just start with us connecting and thinking about what a future could look like, and what are the types of things that we could do to change that.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. Okay, so as you are running around the world and you are very busy and you don't have time for lunch, what is your go-to snack?
Hummus.
Okay, do you make it yourself?
I have made it myself. I've been a little lazier, but it's my go-to snack. It's always been.
I like to make it myself with really sauteed garlic. Okay, I don't always have time for that, but heavy on the garlic. And you are running around and the world is not going your way. And what do you say to yourself to get yourself back in the groove?
This will pass.
And that's enough to do it for you?
It's, I think that there's it's one of the is told as that's the phrase that can make people happy when they're sad and sad when they're happy, and that's just the way life goes. That things will change and evolve into something else. I think that it's not just that one sentence, but everything that it kind of encompasses. That this will be okay.
I love that. I always say nose to the grindstone, eyes to the sky. So everybody keep at it. You can see how excited I am. History, folks, right here today. And we are going to see this in all of our grocery stores in my lifetime. And you are not going to get like wild salmon or whatever, because wild salmon is going to be associated with depleting the oceans that are already sick. You are going to get wild type. And that's the salmon that you're going to get in your grocery stores. I am so excited. I'm counting on you in the next 2 years. Everybody else, thank you for doing all that you do. Thank you for caring. Arye, thanks for being here and like making magic happen.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Yeah, everybody. Thank you and see you next Tuesday. Bye, everybody.
Bye.